Good evening. Welcome to the LSE. My name is Richard Hilton and I'm the arts coordinator here. Before I hand you over, I just want to introduce this evening's event. Thank you for coming. And this evening's event will involve Paul Gilroy introducing Emory Douglas, and Emory will then give a talk on his work, which will last in the region of about 40 minutes. There will be opportunities after that to ask questions. So I'm very pleased to welcome Emory Douglas to LSE, and I'm equally pleased to that Paul Gilroy, who's the professor here, Anthony Giddens Professor in Social Theory, has agreed to introduce and to chair this event. So I'll hand you over to Paul Gilroy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. It's a real honour and a pleasure for me to have the chance to introduce Emory Douglas this evening. A moment when our attention has been turned very much towards the United States of America and to the prospect of the United States of America rejoining the rest of the world, if not to the idea of the imminent end of racism in the Western world. So I do hope you're all looking forward to that as much as me. But it is a perfect moment for us to benefit from a presentation by Emory of his luminous and inspiring work. Emory, a veteran activist, an artist whose record of achievement is unique, I think, and inspiring, precisely because it admits no discontinuity between the world of creativity and the world of revolutionary politics. It is art and culture, Emory demonstrates, which make those revolutionary movements for social and political change actually start to move. Emory was born in Michigan in 1943. I know that there was a brief period of teenage incarceration, a period which, as we learn with so many of our own young people at the moment, is an opportunity to engage and to encounter a different variety of pedagogy than is routinely treated in institutions of this, such as this, but no less valuable for that. I know that you worked in the prison printing shop, I understand, and then later on went on to study commercial art at City College in San Francisco. Obviously, Emory was politically involved as a revolutionary artist, and then, of course, as the Minister of Culture in the Black Panther Party in Oakland, from the late 60s right the way through up into the early 1980s. And I think that involvement in the Black Panther Party from its early days in California was what eventually brought Emory into the role of Minister of Culture. I think in that role, certainly, he's, well, I don't want to embarrass him, but let me say that I feel that Emory is largely responsible for developing the distinctive visual culture and the distinctive iconographic signatures of the Black Power movement worldwide. And certainly that was something that reached out and touched the lives of large numbers of young people like myself during that time who were remote from the United States geographically, but who were during that period strongly influenced by ideas of resistance, ideas of liberation, and ideas of pride that were the stock in trade of the Panthers at that time. I knew some of the posters, I knew some of the, we would occasionally see the newspaper. But I always imagined that there were many people. I always imagined that the work, the visual culture of that moment was the product of an enormous team. So it was a great surprise and a delight for me when my dear friend, the late St. Clair Bourne, who I want to remember this evening in the traditional manner, gave me a book of your work, Emory, and I was entranced, and three profound things struck me about it, and I want to mention them now as a way of laying some groundwork for our discussion later on after your presentation, if I may. First of all, I think there's the question of revolution itself, and I know that we're not allowed to use, it's one of the words we don't use, right? We're not allowed to think with the idea of revolution anymore. After the walls came down, after official Soviet-style communism was laid to rest, the idea of revolution became an eminently disreputable preoccupation. So the first thing I want to suggest is that we return to thinking about the idea of revolution as a way of contemplating alternatives to this broken world we inhabit. And I think that imaginative proximity to the idea of revolution is something that is part of Emory's contribution here, and which I suppose, seems to me to have fostered an extraordinary creativity. Just the nearness between that creativity, or the place of that creativity, and the idea of revolution. I think that's a feature we know from earlier modernist movements in other parts of the world, but it's certainly something which is alive in this legacy. And I think it relates to my second point, which is how you are the Minister of Culture, right? I think that these revolutionary movements of the late 20th century, the ones that tried to adapt the anti-Nazi morality of the post-1945 world to the goal of national revolution, were, and this is true, I think, in the US, because people were reading Fanon, they were reading Cabral, they were reading the theorists of the decolonizing world, and adapting those ideas to the circumstances of the overdeveloped countries, the overdeveloped spaces of the most advanced nation on earth at that time. And I think that how the question of culture then reappears in the practice of those revolutionary movements is a decisive question. And I think I want to ask you whether you imagine that revolutionaries ask, or are inclined to ask, better questions about culture than other kinds of political activists and actors. I think there's a link between the intensity of that concept of culture and the way it's rendered, and the practice of revolutionary politics that's distinctive. And lastly, when I sat down to think about what I would say this evening and to be able to introduce Emory properly, I sat down and thought about other artists whose practice might have informed his own. And they're the only person I could really think of whose energy and political vision and consistency and creativity was something that was reminded me of your own extraordinary contribution, was John Hartfield. John Hartfield, the practitioner, is remembered, I suppose, mostly for his montages during the Nazi period. And I wanted to emphasize the Hartfield connection, and to say that you did all this extraordinary work. We look at the images and the practice, and we look at the collages and the montages and the drawings, and we look at them from the kind of vantage point of a digital culture. We imagine that somehow the world of technology we inhabit and take for granted is something that might be read retrospectively back into that practice. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. I don't know what point you encountered a photocopy machine, right? But I'm sure the Gestetner, the Stakelet, the mimeographic reproduction, all of these things are part of a world of technology which makes certain varieties of creativity and artistic practice possible for you. And I really want to just remind and underline that for everybody, that there's a very analog world of cultural production here that is something we have to recover as the context in which we can evaluate and enjoy the creativity of Emory Douglas. So thank you very much, Emory. I know your work has been recently displayed at the 2008 Biennale in Sydney, at the Museum of Modern Art in Los Angeles, at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, the Richmond Art Center, the Station Museum of Contemporary Art, and that you've been appearing in print magazine, in Art in America, and in the American Institute of Public Art. So belatedly, but appreciatively, let's welcome you here, and we're all dying to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much.
As we would say in the Black Panther Party, all power to the people. And that's the way I will start off my presentation this evening. Excuse my voice, unfortunately it's a little on the outside this evening. The art is a reflection of the politics of the Black Panther Party. I became involved with the Black Panther Party about 3 months into its inception in January 1967. And initially I became the revolutionary artist as he said, and then the Minister of Culture. I began to work on the second edition of the newspaper. I will go through these slides, but I will perhaps talk about some. Others I will just pass up because of the time restraints. In the early days, we used to, the artwork is a reflection in categories also. There were the pig drawings, there were the self-defense drawings, there was the social commentary drawings, and there was those that dealt with solidarity with people's struggles around the world. And initially we started off defining what a pig was. And this was defined by Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, and Eldridge Cleaver. When we used to work on the paper out of a studio apartment before we had a headquarters.
No.
Okay, thank you. What is a pig? A low-natured beast that has no regard for law, justice, or the right of people. A creature that bites the hand that feeds it. A foul, depraved traducer, usually found masquerading as the victim of an unprovoked attack. That was how we defined the pig. And particularly then it was the police who in our neighborhoods were recruited from the sources of those that you've seen in the South who were sicking the water hoses and beating the marchers with the billy clubs were the same types that were being recruited into the North on the police department. We also talked about community control of police. They were meant to be provocative. They were meant to be not just pretty, but be provocative. This one here is also a take on community control of police, but it's also a take on a young man who was the very first member in the background. His name was Little Bobby Hutton. He was 15 years old when he joined the Black Panther Party. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale mentored him. They had to get permission from his parents for him to join the Black Panther Party. He was murdered in Oakland, California, shot 17 times by the Oakland police when he was 17 years old. He was murdered 2 days after Martin Luther King was assassinated. This one came about when the police came to our doors late one evening after I had been out organizing, doing political work with Kathleen Cleaver and Eldridge Cleaver. And they knocked on the door, and Eldridge asked, "Who is it?" They said it was the San Francisco police. He said, "Well, do you have a search warrant?" They say, "No." He said, "Well, you're going to have to kick the door in." They proceeded to kick the door in. And I'm observing what they're doing. What had happened earlier that day, Kathleen Cleaver had purchased a gun because there had been threats on her life. But her husband was a ex-felon who could not have a gun in his possession. So they kicked in the door and they were saying, "What?" And he said, "What are we looking for? Where are the guns?" What they did is 3 weeks later, they went and did the same thing at Bobby Seale, who was the co-founder of the Black Panther Party. And it was thereafter that we wrote this executive mandate that you see at the bottom. And what this executive mandate basically says is that we will no longer allow the police to come to our doors and kick in our doors without a search warrant. Because we remember what took place in the 1930s when the Al Capone gang dressed up like cops and went across town and slaughtered the other gang. So if they have a search warrant and it's legal, we have no problem. But if they've not got a search warrant, then we're not going to let them come into our houses. So thereafter, what happened, you had these common criminals that they began to, got cases with charges. They used them to infiltrate the Black Panther Party to begin to become agent provocateurs within the party. And we began to have shootouts all across the country because they began to put these plants in the party to create conditions because of what we had said we would not allow to do that was illegal. From that, a young man wrote this poem, and I did the illustration to the poem. It says, "Knock, knock, who's there? The pigs. You got a warrant? Don't need one. I'm coming in. Bang, bang, oink, oink, off the pigs." This was a takeoff of the attitude of the police when they come in our community. They don't want to be there anyway because they didn't live in our community. They were predominantly white, racist police department, and they didn't want to be there. And the whole attitude when they came in, it was just niggers, 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 niggers. And so I was taking this old thing, what they used to do in the South when black folks used to pull lie, and when they got into fighting something, they pull lie and acid on each other? Well, I tried to use that, and she'll say, by any means necessary unless you got something else. And so she's fixing to lie them up. This says seize the time. This was in relationship to when they began to form these special squads called tax squads. These are big goon squads, and they had the right, in the police department, they had the right to come around and they could stop you, they could frisk you down, for no apparent reason. They were big, burly guys. They looked like they were on steroids. And so there was a big outcry around this whole concern. And over a period of time, what they did is they integrated it into the police department as opposed to disbanding it. Here again is one that's dealing with the rebellions that were taking place in the neighborhoods during that particular time. All across the countries in the United States, you had riots and rebellions going on because young black men being shot in the back, running from the scene of a petty crime, no gun found, and it was being justified. The high levels of frustration began to boil over, and you had many riots and many rebellions in the United States during that particular time. And this is a take on the psychological impact of how we felt. I surrendered. There's no escape for the invader. Better hand in my gun. Oink, oink, oink. Here's one that was at the same time that you had these rebellions going on. You had the war in Vietnam. So you had the war in Vietnam. You had these battles going on in the neighborhoods. And as you see, I spell America with 3 Ks: KKK, Ku Klux Klan. It says it's hell inside, it's hell outside. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Get out of the ghetto, get out of Latin America, get out of Asia, get out of Africa. U.S. imperialism. Here's our take on young African people, young men who were being sent into the military service to fight a war against the people who had never abused them. And so what it is, they wound up and being controlled by the U.S. imperialists. But once they realize what's going on, they turn around and go against U.S. imperialism. You had many former Black Panther Party members who were in the military, who came into the Black Panther Party. Here's one that's dealing with Israel, the Zionist puppet state of Israel and U.S. imperialism. Zionists and U.S. imperialism, world domination. That's what it's about, world domination. And so this here shows this. Matter of fact, we had Huey Newton went to the Middle East at one point and went to Palestine, and we had supporters and Panthers in Israel, but they wouldn't allow him to come into Israel. Whatever's good for the oppressor has got to be bad for us. And here it says, hey, handle those slaves with care. We're going to need them for Mars, Pluto, and all those other planets. And you got the slaves saying, I knew we should have stopped this shit before it got off the ground. And you got the slave masters saying, okay, goddammit, don't take 400 years this time. So this was a takeoff on the times when they were going up into space. But at the same time, there were other things that were being discussed around space. Because in the late 1990s, I heard a news commentator talking to this gentleman from the Hoover Institute at Stanford. And they got in a discussion about space. And they said that they had a program that they had put in place where they were trying to develop how to house prisoners in space and on barges in the ocean. Because by the year 2025, that the population of the prison industrial complex would be so great that they wouldn't have any place to house them. This is white flight at last, white only, during the space shuttle during that time. But also another thing about the space program. I mean, people, that's a great experience. That's an amazing thing. But what happens when it launches off? All the pollution that it leaves behind. That we never discussed that in conjunction with the toxins that's in the air, or all the other things that impact that it has on our lives, on our immune systems, or what have you. That's never becomes a part of the discussion. Black misery, ain't we got a right to the tree of life? It is my belief that we black people need gas and electricity on cold and dark days, doctors and medicine in times of sickness, breakfast, lunch, and dinner in times of hunger. As you see in the background, I have a picture showing young people eating breakfast. The Black Panther Party had a breakfast for children program all across the country. You had a representative of the state legislature in California said that the Black Panther Party was feeding more hungry children than the United States government. That was true. Freedom. But I have no money for sale. Save the children. When I spend more time fighting the rats than taking care of my children, you know it makes me realize that I have a right to kill the greedy slumlords who forced me to live in these inhuman conditions. Now this sister had a little politics because she got the Huey Newton behind her, she got the pig drawings behind her, she got the free Bobby Seale, free Erica Huggins, and my mama told me that there are some people who are really servants of the people. And this was also related to, as over the young lady's head in the background artwork, it says, Berkeley, California, April 6, 1971, vote yes for community control of police. There was the debate and discussion about community control of police after little Bobby Hutton, which had been murdered on April 6, and a few years prior to that. My suffering, my bitterness, my loneliness, I'm not going to let it get me down. I'm not going to let it turn me around. Perhaps this young man has somebody who is incarcerated. When will I smile when there is no more hunger? Vote for survival. When we talked about politics, we say politics started with unemployment. Politics started with inferior education. Politics started with indecent housing. Politics starts with black men being sent to wars, to fight wars of aggression. We say that these are the things that we should be discussing when you talked about politics. These were the things that we brought to the table during that time when you talked about politics. All power to the people. These are some of the survival programs of the Black Panther Party. We had medical clinics. We had a brand new ambulance service in Winston-Salem, where we had the Black Panther Party on the side of it. We had medical clinics all over the country. We had mobile vans that were in back east in Boston and in New York, who used to do outreach in the community, do sickle cell anemia testing, do other kinds of testing. We had doctors and nurses, and we had students who were going to medical school who used to come and volunteer for that program. We had the breakfast program. We had the free busing to prison program. They bled your mama, they bled your papa, but he won't bleed me. That was taken from a movie called Sweet Sweetback. It was one of the first black movies made by Melvin Van Peebles. We shall survive without a doubt. And these are young people who, in this foreground, who grew up in the Panther School. We had a school that went from preschool up to the 9th grade. It was an accredited school. We had people like Maya Angelou who used to come and read poetry to the kids. We had people like Oscar Brown Jr. I don't know if you know of him. Richard Pryor, you may know of him. Rosa Parks came and stayed with us 2 weeks and visited our school. We had liberation schools all over the country. Hallelujah, the might and the power of the people is beginning to show. This was done when there was a victory. As you see on this button, that was Bobby Seale and Erica Huggins, two party members, leading members of the party, who were on trial and were charged with murder of killing another comrade, which was done by a police provocateur who infiltrated the party and eventually was found guilty of those crimes, and they were released. I just want to testify. I'm not going to sit around any longer. I got freedom on my mind. We're going to keep on struggling for brighter days. We're going to keep on struggling until we win your love. This was about a boycott of a black liquor store owner who was trying to get a distributor's license, and they were protesting at this chain store. And Huey Newton was driving around in the community, and he seen these guys, and he knew them. And he said that we will come in and help you with this boycott if you make a donation to the survival programs. They agreed. We came in, we made the people seeing the Black Panther Party was involved with the boycott. They stopped going into the store. Only those who stopped going into the store were those who were disabled, elder, sick, couldn't go anywhere else. So we said, how are we going to deal with that situation? We went back to and decided that we would bring all of our cars and all of our vans, and we would offer them a ride to anywhere they wanted to go, and we would bring them back to that location. They agreed to that. After that, we closed the store down in about 4 days. But then Bill Boyette said, well, I'm not going to donate to you. We said, okay, we're going to boycott you. And so that's what we did. And as you see in this banjo, that was when we had to boycott. And initially, people couldn't understand why were we boycotting another black business. But when we explained the circumstances of what took place, you had then they began to join the picket line. The only way he stayed in business for 6 months is that he was bankrolled by the White Chamber of Commerce of Oakland, because there were no black people in it, and the owner of the daily paper, the Oakland Tribune. And as we went along, I used some drawings that I had used other before, and I put Boyette still refuses to donate to the community survival program. And as we went along, as you see, we were out in front of the store from 6 in the morning to 2 a.m. because it was a liquor store and they opened at 6 o'clock and they closed at 2 o'clock. And it says, don't support the greedy, support the needy. That was William Nolan, and that was Bill Boyette on the right. And it says, Bill Boyette Blood Bank, where particular people congregate. Since July 31st, 1971, Bill Boyette has refused to donate to the community free survival programs. I'm going out Nolan style because I'm a greedy, greedy man. And here you have the bag with the Nolan's picture on it. And this was a Halloween. Boyette would rather be tricked by Nolan than to treat the people to a piece of bread. Borrowed by Nolan, sold by Boyette, 100% proof blood. But what eventually happened, you had a local representative who became a well-known congressman named Ron Dellums, who came in and negotiated the settlement of the boycott. But in the process, we said, well, he doesn't have to donate to us. He can donate to the Urban League. He can donate to the NAACP. But the deal was that he had to make a donation because that was the deal. So eventually it was settled, and after it was settled, I did a cartoon that showed a sister with a bag of groceries, which is not in here but in the book, and it showed him, and on the bag it says, Brother Bill Boyette supports the community survival programs, so support Brother Bill Boyette. So it wasn't nothing personal. It was about the agreement that we had made. Here's one that deals with Organization of Solidarity, Africa, Latin America, and Asia. This is one from OSPAL, they call it, and that's out of Cuba. And these were 2 images that I had done that they remixed and recreated during that period. And they used to take a lot of my images from time to time because they used to do all these wonderful political posters, and they sent them all over the world. But they never would put my name on it. But so what you had is you had young people who used to go to Cuba during the summer to help work in the sugarcane, to chop the sugarcane, that helped the Cubans out. And they would go over there and they would see these posters, and they would come back and say, you didn't do that work. The Cubans did that work. And they would always say that, but eventually they found out that I did do it because it was a guy named Cushing who did a book, who he himself thought the Cubans had done the work. And he was doing the work on the relationship of the Cuban art to the American artists. And he's seen a lot of the work over, the original work over there with my name on it. As you see, this is one of the earlier versions of the last piece you seen was mixed with that one. I can't choose, the writings is too small, so I won't try to read it. African American solidarity with oppressed people of the world. This is one of the first color images I did. I did this in 1967. I took it and showed it to Eldridge Cleaver, and he wanted to request that if we could use it as a part of the fundraisers to raise funds for the Black Panther Party. Here, this is again one of the images I did that the Cubans used again, and it says solidarity with the African American people, August 18, 1968, and they did it in 4 languages, and they sent it all around the world. Here's one showing the psychology of war, the impact of war, and what it does to the human psyche and to human beings in general. I got the button that says U.S. government approved. Richard Nixon and Richard Agnew. Richard Nixon was the president who had to leave office in disgrace. He was impeached. His vice president, Agnew, had to leave office in disgrace. He was a criminal. These were criminals running the government. Here you have Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger is wanted for war crimes because Henry Kissinger was behind Pinochet and Chile not being prosecuted for human rights violations. He doesn't go anywhere in the world unless he checks to make sure that he's not going to be subpoenaed to ask questions about human rights violations that took place in Chile, that took place during the Vietnam War, in Laos and Cambodia, when people were slaughtered and murdered during that time. We had a lot of young men who refused to go to war. They said, when I did this illustration for you, it's basically, I'm just not going. Peace with honor. I'm just not going. Here again was a takeoff on Tricky Dick, that's what you call Tricky Dick Nixon, and Agnew and the police. And this was a Halloween, trick or treat pigs, trick or treat. King Nixon, he wanted to be in office forever. He didn't never want to leave office. Corporate profit, the fierce spending, subsidized runaway shop, speed up, consumer buying power. That sounds like right now. I, Gerald Ford, am the 38th puppet of the United States. Corporate interest runs America. The President of the United States is just a puppet. Now, I hope Obama can transform that, but that was the reality then. This was during the time when they began to, COINTELPRO came about, counterintelligence program. They began to, how we found out about it was you had these radicals who broke into this office and they got these records, and these records showed that the U.S. government was spying on the American people. We began to publish a lot of that in our newspaper called the Black Panther. And after a while, sometimes the things that we said were very intensely said. And so I did this illustration to show that what was beginning to happen to us around that. And it says, indictment, Black Panthers wanted dead for conspiracy of exposing America. And this one says, I wonder if Nixon is bugging us now. Kidnap. This one took place when Bobby Seale was kidnapped. It was one day I came to the office and Comrade was standing in the office door And they said it was something strange. You could just see that things weren't routinely like they usually be in front of the office, on the street. But we left that evening and we went to the filling station about 2 blocks away to get some gas. It was 3 carloads of us. Bobby was in one car with comrades. I'm in another car, and there was another car. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, you had the federal government agents come down on us with their machine guns. They snatched Bobby Seale out the car. They put him in his car. They drive off. We had one of the cars follow him. At the same time, we got in touch with our lawyers. We found out that they took him to the federal building in San Francisco. Then they took him back to Chicago to stand trial because of the Chicago Democratic Convention, where they had all this activity that went on, and they were being charged with all these ridiculous charges that they were charged with. So now I did this one thereafter inside the paper. It says, "Hello, Black Panther Party. We will soon make it possible for all of you to be with your chairman, The Art of Kidnapping by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation." And I made him look like a little rat, little wheezy rat. That's J. Edgar Hoover, which was, he didn't like black people at all, period. Only thing he said was, the only thing he said during his time was that all black people could do was press his clothes and shine his shoes. You had the agents inside the FBI who had to bring a class action suit in order to to be able to get a higher position in that organization. This is the one I did when Bobby Seale was took back to Chicago to stand trial, and during the proceedings, his lawyer got sick and couldn't defend him because he had to have a minor operation. And so he demanded that he have the right to speak for himself. So, but what happened was that during the proceedings, every time they would mention his name, he said, "I object, Your Honor, I object. I want to cross-examine this person." And he was bound and gagged in the courtroom. First time in the history, never happened before, a person being bound and gagged in the courtroom. And I came up with this thing that says that unarmed people are slaves or subject to slavery at any given time. Dred Scott, 1857. Bobby Seale, 1969. Dred Scott was a black man who was taken into freedom and thought he was a free man out of slavery, thought he was a free man. I think his master was going to take him back into slavery, and so he petitioned the court. And the court just said that he had no rights, that he had to go back into slavery. So here's the connection. A black man has no right that a white racist system is bound to respect. They both had no rights. This was about the peace movement in Chicago during that time when they beat up the hippies and all the others who were out there. And when they thought that they were going back there and do all the things they did and they wasn't going to be challenged. And we always said that they had they meant well in what they was going to do, but they had a privileged mentality. They thought that the pigs wouldn't beat them up, but they did. Free the New York 21 and all political prisoners. We were talking about political prisoners then, and you talk about Black Panther Party political prisoners today. Party members who have been locked up ever since then are locked up today. The New York 21 were charged with over 137 charges. All of them dismissed. All of them dismissed within 4 hours of deliberation in the courtroom. All charges dismissed. Tupac Shakur's mom was a member of the New York 21. This is called a fascist court tried New York Panthers 21. We call the judge a blood-sucking vulture, the true symbol of fascism. This is Fred Hampton, who was the charismatic leader of the Black Panther Party. He was 21 years old. The Raised in the Black is a young brother named Mark Clark, who was in charge of the Southern California chapter of Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. They both were murdered. The police, how did it go down? It came from the White House. There's documents to show that the FBI went up and discussed the whole issue with Richard Nixon to put it in motion. It went down to the Attorney General of the state of Illinois to the local police, to where they put this whole plan in action? Would it inform it, again, an informant, a young man who stole a car, took it across state lines, had a federal case, they made a deal with him to infiltrate the Black Panther Party. He did that. He worked his way up into the security. He was the one who gave them the whole layout of the house and everything. They came at early morning. They knocked on the door. Mark Clark came to the door, asked who it is. They shot through the door. He was immediately killed, shot in the heart. They began to shoot into the house all around at waist level. They kicked the door in. They went into the house. Fred Hampton's to-be wife was in there, pregnant with her son, Fred Hampton Jr. Young man named Doc, spleen was shot out. He had sisters in there who were brutalized. Fred Hampton was drugged in the bed in the back room. They went into the back room and said he's still breathing, and they shot him again and said now he's good and dead. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. That's what Fred Hampton used to say. These are comrades who, on here, salute to those comrades who were murdered in Chicago. You have more Panthers and shootouts with the police and murdered in Chicago than any other chapter outside of L.A. and Seattle. Cautious, surviving is criminal. Event in 2 black men's lives, dramatized why? Prison Camps USA, the unknown slaves. Today it's called the Prison Industrial Complex. The Prison Industrial Complex. What does it do? What's happening with that? They're doing a lot of outsourcing to private institutions, private companies. Now you get corporate America into the prison business. So when you get corporate America into the prison business, that means that you got to make a profit. So if you're in the business of making a profit, you got to have a product to sell, to make a profit. So what is the product that you have to sell? Or what is the product that you need to make the profit? The product is human beings who are locked up, who may not never get out of prison when they should get out, because if you ain't got enough, if you have to have 50% full of a prison needs to be 50% full for you to make a profit, then you're going to make sure that you're going to have 50% of the people locked up in that prison so that you can make a profit. So that means that there may be people that need to get out, that should be out, that did their time, but they can't get out because the fact that they're going to find some way to keep you in there until they can get somebody else to take your place. It's about making money. Boycott lettuce. This was in response to the farm workers who were marching from the valley, protesting to the state capitol, and they were protesting the chemicals that were being used on the lettuce in the fields, because the fact that it was causing problems with the fetuses of the women, and it was toxic and causing cancers and all these other things that they had been well documented. And so they were marching up the street or where our headquarters were, and we heard them. And I went out along with other party members to see what was up. And Cesar Chavez, the leader of the United Farm Workers, was marching with them. And they said they were hungry, and they explained where they were going. We got permission to take them down to our school, and we fed them. We marched with them for 20, 30 blocks, and we broke bread with them for lunch, and they continued on their march. So this illustration came from that. As you see, in the early days, we used to run for Bobby Seale for mayor of Oakland. We helped get the first black mayor elected to Oakland, California. Prior to that, there had never been any African Americans elected as mayor to Oakland, California. We were able to register more people to vote in Oakland, California and Alameda County than ever been registered in the history of registration in Alameda County. This was just a takeoff of Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver. This is a symbolic front page. Again, political prisoners of U.S. fascism. That was when they were both incarcerated at different times. This is the time when Huey Newton and Bobby Seale was on trial in New Haven, and they were trying to electrocute him in a lecture chair. So I took this illustration, I created this illustration like this one to bring that point home. Huey Newton didn't like it because he said it looked too real. But Bobby Seale said he liked it because he thought it saved his life. In Vietnam, the Vietnamese say if the enemy refuses to get out, annihilate him. And that's what they were doing. In Iraq, the Iraqis say if the enemy refuses to get out, annihilate him. Same thing. Babylon. During this period, Babylon was the biblical word that was used by Eldridge Cleaver to define what the U.S. was about during that period. As you see, you got this pig, got his money glasses on, he got hand grenade in his hand, he got money in his mouth, he got flies around him, he's drilling at the mouth, he got a blood-sucking vulture on the end of his gun. He's ready for overkill. He got the lynch rope in his hand, and he's standing in the middle of the Pentagon. And you had all these different things, the names on the east side were things that were going on during that period. In New Haven, Connecticut, Bobby Seale and Erica Huggins were on trial. There were thousands and thousands of students from Yale and all these other institutions who came out and supported them. You had in Kent State, you had white students who were shot and murdered for protesting on the campus against the war in Vietnam. In Augusta, Georgia, in Jackson, Mississippi, and on other campuses, there were shootouts and battles with black students on those campuses who were shot and killed. Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Palestine, all these things and many more were going on during this period. U.S. imperialists and all those little imperialists. This is U.S. nursing all those little baby piglets. All of these countries were involved in colonization of other people in the world at some point in time. If they weren't directly, they was indirectly involved in it. We want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. That was one of the points of the 10-point platform of the Black Panther Party. Pigs want Panthers cool. Reagan attacks Eldridge Cleaver. Speaking as the racist governor of California, I don't think Eldridge Cleaver should teach at UC. University of California wanted Eldridge Cleaver to be a teach there. But the governor opposed it. Ronald Reagan opposed it. Ronald Reagan is the same governor who was holding the press conference when we went to Sacramento in the early days when they were trying to pass the gun laws because the Black Panther Party knew the gun laws better than they did and was patrolling the communities. So they got a local assemblyman to work on passing these gun laws, and he was there on the grounds of the state capitol about 10 feet away from us when we came that day. He eventually became the President of the United States. Here again is one when we got word in regards to the attacks that were going to take place against the Black Panther Party. And we had ex-Vietnam veterans in our organization who helped us put together a defense mechanism against that. You see, because what happened, when I showed you the one about Fred Hampton, prior to that they had went to Seattle, the FBI, the government, and they kept calling our office in Seattle as a black agent. He kept calling, and the Panthers said, we ain't going to talk to him. But he kept calling and said, well, let us go see what he's talking about. They went and they talked to him, and he told them that they had this plan to massacre the Panthers. But we don't know if he was sincere or was he doing it for psychological reasons. But in any event, it was then thereafter that they went to the local authorities there in Seattle to get them involved in the plan, and they refused to go along with it. That's why they went to Chicago, where Fred Hampton was murdered. 4 days later, they went to L.A., and there was a 5 to 6 hour shootout in Los Angeles, California. The only reason why Panthers weren't killed in Los Angeles is because we had ex-Vietnam veterans had already prepared. They had dug ditches inside the office, so when the bullets was coming back and forth, they were under the ground in these trenches, saved their lives. And the community came out. Angela Davis was one of those organizers out there to bring out the community during that battle. So these reflect that during that particular time. We would not hesitate to either kill or die for our freedom. I know one thing, them pigs had better stay from my door trying to kick it in, talking about they don't need no search warrant. George Jackson lived. George Jackson was a black man who went to prison as a common criminal. But when he went in, got politicized, and he requested from Huey Newton to be organized in the prisons. He did that, and he was highly respected. And he was murdered in San Quentin. Black people can destroy the machinery that enslaves the world. America cannot stand to fight every black country in the world and fight a civil war at the same time. It is militarily impossible to do both of these things at once. The students focus their rebellions on the campuses, and the working class focuses its rebellions on the factories and picket lines. But the lumpen finds itself in a peculiar position of being unable to find a job and therefore is unable to attend the university. The lumpen has no choice but to manifest its rebellion in the university of the street. What is the lumpen? The lumpen is the brother and sister as we defined it. It just can't get no job. Don't want no job now because they can't get none. Unemployed, just don't care. Just don't care. Ready to go to battle. That was the lumpen. For every pork shop, there's a frying pan. Why must black people look at each other through prison bars? Where is our freedom? The brothers in maximum security. The families and loved ones on minimum security. We had a little politics here with the 3 buttons. That George Jackson is the top one. He was the brother who was murdered in San Quentin. But before he was murdered in San Quentin, he was in Soledad prison, another prison. And these 3 brothers, other 2 brothers with him, were charged with the murder of a guard. Eventually that charge was dismissed. The other 2 brothers eventually got out of prison, but George wasn't fortunate enough to make it out. This is a sister used to live in the back of our office, and she used to love the party, and so she used to get the paper every day. And it says, it seems to me that it's cheaper for the U.S. government to starve poor people than to feed us. And I took these clippings that I got from the daily newspaper, and I put on the back of the paper there. It says, U.S. government sells surplus wheat to Russia. Billions of dollars worth of food is dumped into the ocean each year by the U.S. government. That was real. That was true. Rather than feed the hungry, they throw it away. Throw it into the ocean. This one called SAFE, Seniors Against a Fearful Environment. We had a seniors program. We used to take them shopping. We used to have fashion. We used to do fashion shows. They used to come together at our community center called the Oakland Community School, and in the evenings it was the learning center. And it says, why should Oakland spend $54,000 on a helicopter when we need funds for Seniors Against a Fearful Environment? And what we're saying there, I got 5 more minutes, so I will go through them after this, and then perhaps I'll just, maybe they can, if there's questions, they can continue to show the slides, but I won't be able to give you any insight into them. Well, so what happened? You say, why can you use this helicopter? You pay $54,000 for this helicopter, when you can use that same money to give to this young man or young lady to escort these seniors to cash their checks, if you really wanted to stop crime. If you're really concerned about stopping crime, then you would invest in the community, set a surveillance in the community. Chairman Bobby Seale for mayor. Vote for survival. Again, I won't go through them again. When will it rain? When will it rain? When it rains, we have very little shelter. When we're hungry, we have not enough food. But when we come together for our survival, we will have freedom. Amen, amen, amen. Listen to them big pigs banging on my door, asking me for some rent money. They should be paying my rent. Unfortunately, I like to read that one, but it's long and our time is almost up. So give me a wave of the hand, and I'll stop when you ask me to, please. This was the Olympics when 1968, when Tommy Smith and John Carlos went to the Olympics to get a back power sign. But there was others who went who just didn't do anything. They just stood there. Some of them took their shoes off to protest. Others never stood up and raised their hand when the national anthem was played. So this was a takeoff on their part of the protest. The Olympics, he runs the race. He runs, he comes to the finish line. He stands on the podium. He still stands on the podium. He comes back home with his hands raised. And when it's over, a nigger is a nigger is a nigger. South Africa. I took these pictures from the house of bondage to show the conditions and situation and how it ignite, how the spark lit the period fire. And when the fire lights, it says repression breeds resistance. That's again when we said the divestment program was going on in relationship to South Africa. It says the city of Oakland is investing $16 million in racist South Africa. This was all over the United States. I've been forced to work all my life picking cotton, digging ditches, washing dishes, scrubbing other people's floors. All this and more I was forced to do for slave wages. But those days are long gone. Now I demand equality, justice, and peace. Have I got another minute, or should I stop? I don't know. Okay. Just wait until I get a little bigger so that I can wear my daddy's hat and shoot my daddy's gun. We'll always keep close watch on the fascist movement so that they will have a miserable day. Nightmare, nightmare, we'll force you away, never to let you come back to haunt us another day. When I cast my vote to impeach Nixon, it won't be because of Watergate alone. We've been lied to, murdered, jailed, brutalized, unemployed, neglected as infants, young adults, and senior citizens, denied adequate medical care and attention, food, clothing, and shelter, forced to fight wars of aggression, support wars against liberation. Hypertension, #1 black killer. Solidarity. For the young, the old, the poor, and the black, living in America is brutal. Young people in that picture there were searched when they went to the trial of Panthers who were incarcerated called San Quentin 6. Young sister in the community was abused and brutalized. So these there. Hallelujah. Survival program. Unemployed. That's the picture of unemployed. This was a public housing thing that I did. I can't read it because of time. I'll just go through it quickly. Revolution in our lifetime. We black people ain't begging no more. We had a free food program. Used to give 10,000 bags of groceries at a time, all across the country. Filled to the back, filled to the brim. I have stood by too long while the racist pigs brutalize and murder my people. The blood of the pigs must flow in the street. In God we trust. Exploitation, capitalism, the money is in God we trust. There's a saying that my partner was saying that it's called the 3 M's. Man made money, money drove man mad. All of it coming out the rear end. Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, California, Chicago, New York, America. Freedom is a constant struggle. U.S. imperialism, when Tricky Dick Nixon coined the word black capitalism. And we showed that if imperialism falls, black capitalism is a weed, it's going to fall too. That was Happy Birthday, Huey. This said we want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our black community. This one deals with the holiday Christmas. We didn't have nothing against holiday Christmas. We gave, if people wanted Christmas trees, we gave them to them. But it was about the exploitation of the holiday itself in America. When when you have poor people thinking they got to go out and buy these gifts and stuff for their families, put all this stress on them, that's exploitation. Just wait until I get a little bit. I think I might have said that one already. Okay. You can stop it out. Maybe I can just click them and stop it. Do that.
Emory's very kindly agreed to take some questions about his work and about the different things that he's done, both as an artist and as a political activist, a member of the Black Panther Party, and as their Minister of Culture, as you know. So who would like to begin? Can I please ask you, in the interests of keeping things moving, to try and make your comments into questions and to try and make those questions pithy rather than making speeches from the floor. I think that way things move better. Would you like to start? This gentleman here. I think there's supposed to be a microphone.
Hi. Just want to ask you, as an artist, how intense or how difficult was it during that climate of that time to produce the work that you did?
Well, it was intense because we were being shot at, and it was. But you know, and we knew that there was the government was out to try to silence us, because it was not so much about the art itself. It was about the art, but also the fact of what we were doing. We was exposing the government for what it should have been doing, because we had a breakfast program, a free breakfast program. We had for children. We had free good food giveaways for those who needed it, and we were showing that this is what the government should have been doing. See, but it was intense, but it was fun. I mean, we were young. We were from the ages of 15 to 22, 23 years of age. Bobby Seale was 28 and was considered the old man.
Over there, with the red pen in their hand. Thanks.
Hi. A big question today is the situation in America today. Obviously, a lot has changed, but some hasn't. So, what's your analysis of the situation today in terms of racism and in terms of exploitation or capitalism that you're also talking about?
Much as things change, they still stay the same. You still got the issues that you got to deal with.
Here, center. Yes, that's faster. Thank you.
Are you still drawing your pictures now? Because I've noticed a lot of your pictures back from the 60s and the 70s, they're relevant to today and they're quite prophetic. Prophetic? Is that correct? Yeah, and they seem to sort of, they're telling history, they're history from that time, but they are very relevant to today.
Yes, I still do artwork. I believe I might have some on the end of this while I'm asking questions, might get to them. That deals with the prison industrial complex, deal with HIV, AIDS, and health, all those issues. Yeah.
Just while I have the microphone, and I know we're not supposed to say things, but I grew up in East San Jose where Cesar Chavez grew up, and so it was called Sal Si Puedes, which means in English, get out if you can. And in my high school, the president of the Black Student Union was a Panther. I went to Black Panther meetings. I got my first Mao's Little Red Book from a Black Panther meeting. And I just want to say thank you for coming. That a lot of, when I tell my stories to people here, I think they think I'm exaggerating. But, I mean, you sort of reinforced a lot of the way I remember it. Thank you.
Right at the back there, and then over here.
Hi. Now that Obama has become president, how do you think he will change the situation not only for black people but for other ethnic minorities in America?
Well, he's an inspiration at this point. It depends on what happens. You know, he's dealing with he's coming into a toxic situation. You know what I mean? And it's a personal achievement. At the same time, it's a historical achievement as it relates to the African American struggle and oppressed people struggle in the country for equality. But at the same time, you have to understand that just because McCain lost and the Republicans lost, they ain't disappeared. So you still got those battles that go on. So it depends on what happens in the process and how much support he gets for his agenda from those newly elected officials of the Democratic Party. So it's a process. I mean, I could sit here and tell you that this is going to happen, that going to happen, but the secret is in what takes place. I mean, we can all sit in a circle and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows.
Do young African Americans today appreciate your work, or do you find it's more appreciated overseas by people who haven't experienced the brutality? Do young African Americans today appreciate your work, or is it more appreciated overseas, where amongst people who haven't really experienced that brutality and that culture?
Oh no, it's been both. I've had a lot of youngsters from the hip hop community and younger generations always ask me to come and do slide presentations and to participate in their venues. Universities and students at the universities are always asking me to participate in their venues. So it's all over. It's everywhere. Yes.
Hello. Hi. I'm
Hello.
over here. I'm the lady that said carry on.
Okay.
Because let's put it this way, we don't get a chance to see someone like you. I just want to say a personal thank you, because I was a child in the 70s. I was actually 15. I didn't realise that you were all so young. And I'd just like to say thanks for what you did, the fight you went through, because to be perfectly honest, anyone who's about 40, 50 in this audience, it meant a lot. It changed a lot of our lives. And even though it's not carried on today as much as it could have done, thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a bit of your analysis on that. I find there's a real absence in our modern day of kind of committed, organised political organisation, specifically from the young today. And I was just wondering what you think has kind of changed. You're saying you guys were so young. What has changed? The apathy that is so
since then, what has changed since then?
Yeah.
Well, you've had crack cocaine introduced in the community. You had cutbacks on social assistance for those who needed it. You got the black on black violence. You see what I'm saying? You got they have trickled into the middle class who now have an interest and don't want to deal with these other things because they're dealing with their survival of these homes and the property that they got. So they kind of manipulate us into a situation that we have to work ourselves out. You got HIV/AIDS that you're dealing with. You got all these health issues. You got people who are millions and millions of people who are uninsured, can't get medical care. You see what I'm saying? So you got all these dynamics that you're dealing with that didn't exist then. You got a whole nother generation now of young people who are 15, 20 years old, multimillionaires. You know what I mean? Now the ones on the front of the magazines or in the magazines advertising for the Maseratis and the big bling bling and all that. You see? So you got a whole other dynamics that you're dealing with today that didn't exist then. That's if we have some of them are obstacles to overcome, other ones are not.
Now there's someone on the... Oh, okay, great, you've got it.
Bring greetings, first of all, from Dr. Mark Alexander and from Dr. Tommy Smith, who we were fortunate enough to have in Camden to launch our Black History season a few weeks back. But my question is in relation to the Black Panthers and the situation today. We know from reading that the attempts by the government to basically undermine the organization and to derail it, to some degree was successful. And I'd be interested to hear your views on some of those former Black Panther members, like Assata Shakur, who had to run off to Cuba.
Well, Assata Shakur was a young lady who was in a car with some Panthers, and they had a shootout on the turnpike, and she just happened to be in the car, and the person named Jade, one of the Panthers named Zaid, was murdered, and the police was killed, and she was shot because she had her hands up, and she was shot by, I don't know how many times, put in prison. Make a short long story short, she was liberated from prison, went to Cuba, and that's where she is today. But what they did recently, they had this representative from Newark, New Jersey, who introduced a bill to classify her as a terrorist. And they classified her as a terrorist. But those who went along with that, particularly in the Black Congress, Congressional Congress there, didn't know that Assata Shakur and Joanne Chesmore was the same person. Because when it was introduced, they used the name Joanne Chesmore. You see? So what they did is they voted for the bill to reclassify her as a terrorist. So not only that, you have Panthers who, right now, who are being charged 40 years later with a killing of a policeman in San Francisco that they had nothing to do with. These Panthers were in New Orleans and they were tortured. I mean, they took the police, they took the federal marshals, they took the San Francisco Police Department, and they took the LA Police Department. They went down to New Orleans, they questioned them, put them in the room, stripped them down to their clothes, chained them to the chairs, and they started asking them questions. And they couldn't answer the questions. They used cattle prods. They put cattle prods up their anus. They put cattle prods on their testicles. They put them all on their back. They put hoods on their head. They put hot sheets over them. They beat them with billy clubs. They did all that. And they finally said, okay, I will say whatever you want me to say. They say, don't worry about it. We got the statement right here we want you to sign. They signed the statement. They were let out of their custody into another custody. It was shown that they had been tortured. Later on, they tried to bring the charges up again in San Francisco. It was thrown out because it was under torture. It was also thrown out in LA when they tried to bring up the case again, also under torture. But the federal marshals who were in charge then have now been raised up to another level. And now they come back knocking on their doors 40 years later, wanting to recharge, want to talk to them. They say, we're not going to talk to you. You know what you did to us. And they refuse to talk to them, so it takes little or nothing to go to a grand jury to get somebody charged with a crime. So when they had to go in front of the grand jury, they refused to talk to the grand jury because of the fact of what they did to them. So they stayed in jail for almost 6 months. The trial is going on now. They claim that they got all this new evidence. The lawyers keep asking for the new evidence, but they don't have anything. It's about vindictiveness. It's just like Haiti. They don't never like a successful slave rebellion or slave revolt. The Haitians was successful against Napoleon, and they ain't gonna never forget that. The Black Panther Party was like slave revolts in America. They ain't gonna never forget that.
I have two questions. I hope that's all right. The first question is, I'm just wondering, what would you say to us, as in, what would you want us to do at the moment in relation to these sort of issues such as racism, not just in America but in the UK? That's my first question. And I also just wondered what, at the very beginning of when you started creating your artwork, I wonder what inspired you, because I think Professor Gilroy was saying at the beginning that he couldn't find any artists who were really very similar to you, and I was just wondering what inspired you to create art of that sort of style.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first part of your question, it would be you should feel you have to decide on what you want to do. and how you feel that you can make a contribution to society and overcoming these obstacles that we have to deal with. The second part is the style and the work that I did was a reflection of the politics. This art would never exist without the Black Panther Party. The styles were styles that I used to try to use when I was taking up commercial art, but they told me they weren't commercial. But I always remembered and kept those styles. And when I got into the Black Panther Party, I was able to improve on them and use them because I didn't have all these restrictions. And when you get into commercial art, you got restrictions, you see. But in the Black Panther Party, I had that freedom to be creative in the styles and the way I wanted to. But also, we had a lot of limitations as it relate to materials. So therefore, my style also evolved out of the materials that we had available to us to use.
Okay, now there are about 4 people who want to come in, 5 actually now, more hands going up all the time. I think, given that we have to finish by 8, that what I'll try to do is to take 3 or 4 questions at one go and then let Emory answer whatever he is able to answer. It's more efficient than going to and fro. And so I'd ask those of you who are going to speak now, first here, then over there, and then on this side of the room, you, and then a couple on this side of the room, gentleman there and the gentleman at the back with a hand up, and then Emory will reply to that. So if you would please pass the microphone as rapidly between speakers as possible, that would be great. We'd all be grateful for that. This gentleman here.
Yes, thanks for that inspiring delivery. My problem is that you mentioned something called the prison industrial complex. If you could explain a little more in terms of, was it a deliberate part of American fascism, or was it just a new construct to destroy the black community within the United States?
Okay. And now, hold that thought, Emory.
Thank you. As a college student from Chicago, I don't see political art, as frequent as maybe in the past, and I was wondering what you think the current role of art is in politics, and in particular the American struggle for equality.
Okay, thank you. Now you. Actually, if you stand up and shout... Oh, no, there's another mic there. Okay. Thank you.
Less of a question and just regarding what we can do to kind of serve the legacy of the Panthers. The Panthers were, racism was more, it was a tool. It was always seen as a tool, a symptom. And there's so much going on in England and around the world to fight for and to serve the legacy of the Black Panthers and to take influence from Emory. It was never just a single movement. It was a grassroots movement of many people, and there's so much going on. Young people are involved in that today to get involved in.
Thank you. Over there on the wall on that side towards the back, and then this gentleman here with the newspaper.
Greetings, my brother. I just wanted to ask, in terms of the art that's depicted and the style that you use, do you find that younger artists have sort of taken up that style? Because it's a depiction of African faces in a very realistic way. Second question I wanted to ask is, you mentioned about the food program, the feeding programs that were developed by the Black Panther Party, the care of elderly. I presume there were also creches for young children. With that level of organization, is it possible to sort of revive that level of organization currently across the African American community?
Do you finally? And then you can just pick what you want to pick. You don't have to feel you have to answer these extraordinary questions.
Hi. I'm Sukant from the Black Panther Commemoration Committee, who, along with LSE and Richard in particular, and the gallery in Urbis and Manchester, which currently Emory's exhibition is taking place until next year, April, have been hosting not only Emory Douglas, but also another brother from the Black Panthers, a veteran, Billy X, who's outside on the stall. And that's why I've been coming in and out, trying to get Billy to come in and say a few words. But he likes to be behind the scenes. So please, if you could, please feel free to engage with Billy outside as well on the stall. And we're selling the Panther Legacy magazine out there. I'd just like to also convey the fact that we've been We've had a very hectic schedule this week. Every day we've been hitting different venues. We've gone grassroots on Monday in Brixton with a local grassroots organization called the Remember Olive Collective. Linton Kwesi Johnson was in the audience and he contributed to the meeting. We represented Derry, I think just yesterday or Tuesday evening, with Eamon McCann, the veteran civil rights activist, and there was Sinn Féin there, and Bernadette Devlin. And we're going to finish off this tour this week representing another community of struggle. That's Ladbroke Grove, Notting Hill, at the Tabernacle on Saturday. So if you're interested, please come along, get a flyer from me. And people may or may not know, but Marcus Garvey passed away in that community. The Notting Hill Carnival itself was set up by a local black woman, Claudia Jones, who was a Maoist. So it's a very rich community of struggle, and it'll be, I think it'll be a great, and people who know a little bit about modern youth culture in London will know about MC Bashi, who's a local hero, and he'll be representing and doing a little PA there as well. So it'll be a great night of celebration in commemorating the Panther legacy.
Okay. Just last question. I was wondering just to what extent the Black Panther Party is still in existence today, and if there's any credence to the idea that with the kind of the dissipation of the party, that a lot of the members actually ended up being leading gangs in Oakland and Los Angeles.
Okay. Well, is some more? Well, I'll take the last one first. Well, you said what the Black Panther Party is in the gangs. Yeah, Black Panther Party, we had many members who were part of the gangs during that day. They came out of the gangs into the Black Panther Party, particularly in Los Angeles during that time. In Chicago, we used to work with the gangs. We used to work in the gangs then. But in Chicago, we had such respect with the gangs that we were the only organization allowed to go in those housing projects and do social outreach and do food programs, do health, medical, preventative medical care, all those things because of the relationship that they had with us. They understand the oppression, but there's chaos going on with them at the same time. The Bloods, the Crips, when they initially started off, they started as a social organization that turned into a gang. Because when they were early on, they came by our office one day when they were on their way back to Chicago, to L.A. And they were younger than we were at the time. And there's ones who came by, said they respected the party and wanted to come by, but at the same time, they wanted us to join with them. You see, our politics was to the point where we understood that we weren't about that at that particular time. We seen a hard edge because they wanted to join us because their colors was blue and ours was blue. So they wanted us to join with them. But at the same time, we've had a great relationship. We had Panthers in L.A. who have negotiated with the Bloods and the Crips and those different sects and as a relationship to truce, in relationship to the killing that's going on and all those things. So we have had, and still to this day, they give props and respect to the Black Panther Party. You have to need the bastards of the party. It's a film that I would encourage if you want to know about that, is you should see that. It got one Blood and one Crip. It goes into the whole history of the gangs in L.A. And they regret the fact that they've been a part of that total devastation. The brother here was the first one. He talked about the prison industrial complex and how it impacts black, and does it still impact blacks the same way today? Am I correct? Yes, it does. I mean, this illustration you see here is these are brothers who have been locked up in Angola prison. This is for brothers in Angola prison. We call it Angola 3. For 37 years, they were incarcerated in isolation because they were accused by a pedophile in prison, pointed out by a pedophile in prison, of killing a guard, which they could not have done. The pedophile was given a written by the warden and them, he was given he was recommended for parole after he did that. But these things different information has come out regarding that case, that one of the brothers has been out for 5 years or more. Another one of them, this conviction has just been overturned. Hopefully he'll be out soon. Then you got one more that we have to deal with. So you see, you're dealing with vindictiveness. And of course, the prisons, industrial complex, that's about poor people. People who are locked out of the system, who go out and commit crimes to survive sometimes. At the same time, it's about racism in America. You see? That's because blacks can get a longer time for most crimes than white folks will get. You see? As poor folks will get, or poor folks will get more crime than a rich person can get. So you have the class and you have the racism.
Well, I hope you'll all join me in expressing our appreciation for Emory's presentation tonight. We're really grateful to you.